part of the challenge of the HOV lanes is you have to sort of, you're trying to manage the total demand, and so what you're trying to do is entice people out of single occupant cars into high occupant, into carpool lanes basically. But you can run into a little bit of trouble is when the carpool lanes aren't that when you're not that effective at sort of transferring some of those people into high occupancy vehicle lanes, then basically you've built an additional lane of capacity for a small, and you're not completely, I think part of the challenge with when you look at sort of the Portland infrastructure is that, the only HOV lane we have is sort of on, is I-5 from the central city to the bridge, but the HOV lane ends at the key place where you want to bottleneck congestion. So it's there, but it doesn't provide, you get in the HOV lane and you run up to the congestion. So it saves you some time, but it's not a complete system. And so I think, the real benefits from HOVs lanes are when you have a system of lanes and facilities that allow people to bypass sort of key points of congestion. So if you've ever been in Seattle, there's a real advantage to being an HOV lane, to be an HOV vehicle in most parts of the system because they have HOVs everywhere and they have bypass through key sort of bottleneck congestion pieces. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg. You need the entire system for it to be effective. Without the entire system, there's not much. There are probably people in Portland that don't know that there's an HOV lane. There are objectives of sort of reducing demand and moving people out of cars and in transit and other modes and lowering emissions. You lower your revenue source to make those improvements. And so for a long time, the highway, where that money went was a stable funding source because travel was growing. But over the last 4 or 5 years, how to move away from the gas tax. So can you do sort of a tax that's based on just the number of miles you've driven rather than on the gas you consumed? And then can you structure those policy decisions to incentivize the things you want to do to lower emissions? And then the third thing would be to try and manage the demand with some pricing strategies. So to take away that, the whole idea that, a mile traveled at 5 p.m. on a congested freeway costs you the same as a mile traveled at midnight on an uncongested freeway. The resource at 5 p.m. is sort of too valuable to sort of price it at the same. So, within all the constraints of, social equity and all the things we need to do, we should come up with a sort of a pricing strategy that gives people the right signals, that if you want to make a trip at 5 p.m. on a congested network, you can, it's going to cost you the X, but if you can and you can shift your trip, 1 hour later, it's, half the price. Because we really can't afford to sort of build an 8-lane freeway to use to add tolling to the HOV lane, saying, all right, well, we built this lane with the HOT lanes incorporate a few of those elements, right? So it's trying to manage the demand by moving single occupant drivers into carpool, high occupancy vehicle lanes. Then by adding the toll, it's sort of sending a price signal, that this is a valuable resource. If you want to use it, you can pay for it. And we're sort of going to use that money then to sort of either increase, make the HOT lanes better, so that more people, like you could look at London and Milan and Stockholm and all these cities that are charging sort of congestion pricing, to enter the central city, and Minneapolis, Texas, there's a new toll road in Washington D.C. in California. They're kind of bubbling up. They're not all a complete. None of them are a complete system, but there's been, a number of research efforts that have sort of looked at this idea of, how do we get away from the gas tax? How do we build a sustainable, equitable? But I mean, for the near foreseeable future, emissions are an issue, and it's both, greenhouse gases, but also sort of the particulate and criteria pollutions that result in smog and air quality issues for asthma and, you know, cancer and those things. So